Welcome back to the Samvaad Podcast Series, Decoding the Scriptures. This time we're diving into something a bit different. It's all about sound, specifically a form of Hindustani classical vocal music called Dhrupad.
And it's got some seriously deep roots in Indian tradition.
Absolutely. We'll be exploring its origins, poetry, and maybe even a connection to dance.
I'm ready when you are.
Great. We'll be using Dhrupad Annual 1987 as our main guide. Right away, I was struck by the debate about Dhrupad's beginnings.
Yeah, Rajaman Singh Tomar of Gwalior, who ruled from 1486 to 1516, often gets the credit.
Like he just invented it.
Well, not exactly. It's more likely that Dhrupad developed over time, and royal patronage had a big influence.
So it's more about a lineage, passing down and refining a tradition.
Precisely. Think about emperors like Akbar and Shah Jahan, known for their love of the arts. Their patronage wasn't just money, it was about prestige.
Kind of like a royal stamp of approval.
Right. Akbar's support would have elevated Dhrupad to a whole new level.
And we're talking about some serious historical documents, too. The Kitab-i-Noras from the 16th century, compositions by Sultan Ibrahim Adil Shah II of Bijapur himself.
And don't forget the Sahasras, compiled under Shah Jahan around 1650, with over 1,000 Dhrupad texts attributed to Nayak Baksu.
Incredible. They offer a glimpse into the past, don't they?
Absolutely. We can see the musical practices and aesthetics of that time.
But it's not just those documents, is it? The way we understand Dhrupad is also shaped by Persian and Sanskrit sources.
You're right. It's fascinating that Persian texts were some of the earliest to document Dhrupad.
So its popularity might have started with the elite?
Possibly. Abul Fazl in the Ayakvari described Dhrupad as having a refined taste. Clearly, it was a hit with the elite.
But what about Sanskrit sources?
Well, we don't see a formal definition until Bhavabhatta's Anupa Sangita Ratnakara in the late 17th century.
Wow, almost 2 centuries later.
It seems Dhrupad took a while to be recognized in those circles. It went from a vernacular art form to something more formal over time.
Like, it had to prove itself.
It's possible. But to really appreciate Dhrupad, we need to dive into its core, the poetry.
The lyrics. Okay, I'm ready.
So a Dhrupad song text has a specific structure. 4 lines called sthayi, antara, sanchari, and abhoga. They're mostly in Braj-bhasa, known for its poetry and devotion.
So not just rhyming, but creating a mood.
Precisely. It's like storytelling through music and words.
I like that.
And here's a cool detail. Many song texts include a chap, the composer's signature within the lyrics.
A signature, hidden in the lyrics.
Exactly. A testament to their creativity.
I'll have to listen for those. But while talking about poetry, I keep thinking about another aspect of Dhrupad, its potential link to dance.
That often gets overlooked. People think Dhrupad is too austere for dance, but our source challenges that.
Like uncovering a lost connection.
Yes. For example, Sankita Ratnakara describes dances accompanied by Dhrupad, especially emphasizing the Dhruvapada section.
So they were connected historically.
It seems so. We even see Bhavabhatta mentioning Dhrupad in the context of dance in Anupa Sanjitankusa.
That's really interesting.
Makes you think about how Dhrupad, with its rhythms and improvisation, might have worked with dance.
I can imagine a dancer interpreting those nuances.
It challenges our perception of Dhrupad and opens up a whole world of possibilities.
We're starting to see the full picture, the many sides of Dhrupad.
You've just scratched the surface. There's much more to uncover. It really changes how we think about both art forms, doesn't it?
Yeah, like we've been putting them in boxes when maybe there was more fluidity between them.
Exactly. It's about approaching these traditions with an open mind. Artistic boundaries can be fluid.
So Dhrupad could be more than just a listening experience. It could interact with other art forms.
Precisely. And that open-mindedness is important as we get into Dhrupad's style. The Dhrupad Annual talks about staya, which is like the core identity of a musical style.
The DNA of the music.
Yes. It's the specific way those notes are approached and ornamented. Dhrupad singers are very careful about maintaining staya.
They're protecting the tradition.
Exactly. They're safeguarding that purity. But how does that compare to Khyal?
Oh, good point. We talked about that briefly before. Khyal is much more improvisational, right?
You got it. Khyal adapts and changes, while Dhrupad holds on to tradition. It's like 2 different approaches to the same goal, expressing beauty through music.
One is fluid, the other is fixed.
And that shows how diverse the Hindustani tradition is. Lots of styles coexisting.
It celebrates both innovation and deep preservation.
It really does. And this all circles back to what the Samvaad Podcast Series is all about. It's not just the music itself.
It's the stories it tells, the values.
Right. We're decoding the scriptures and understanding the cultural context.
It's like putting a puzzle together. Each episode is a new piece.
Yes. And as we explore, we realize these aren't just relics. They're living sources of wisdom and inspiration.
They're still relevant today.
Precisely. They connect us to those who came before us. We're part of a continuous line.
Carrying the torch, so to speak.
Exactly. But even as we celebrate Dhrupad's history, there's still that mystery about its origins.
Yeah, like we're trying to find the start of a river. We know where it goes, but not where it begins.
I like that. And it's true. Raja Mansingh Tomar of Gwalior gets the credit, but art forms rarely have a single starting point.
They evolve over time, picking up influences along the way.
Just like a river with all its tributaries. So we may never know exactly when Dhrupad was born, but we can see the things that shaped it.
All those contributors.
Yes, and royal patronage played a huge role, especially with Akbar and Shah Jahan.
Their support went beyond just finances.
It was about raising Dhrupad's status, attracting the best musicians.
Can you imagine being a musician in Akbar's court? Exciting and nerve-wracking all at once.
Right. The pressure to perform well, but also the honor. And those courts weren't just for performance. They were places for learning and preserving musical knowledge.
The Benaras and the Sahasras are proof of that.
They show how dedicated everyone was to making sure Dhrupad's legacy continued.
It's like they knew they were part of something bigger.
And thanks to them, we have these amazing resources to help us understand Dhrupad today. But we also have to consider how it's presented in Persian and Sanskrit sources.
It's interesting that Persian texts were some of the first to describe Dhrupad's form and popularity.
Right. That suggests that maybe it was popular with the elite first.
It had to be accepted there before it became part of the more traditional Sanskrit world.
Exactly. And Abu Fazl's account in I-Akbari backs that up. He called it a popular style with refined taste, clearly appealing to the elite.
But it wasn't in a major Sanskrit text until Bhavabhatta's Anupa Sangita Ratnakara centuries later.
It seems Dhrupad took its time moving from a vernacular tradition to a more formalized one.
It had to find its place.
Yes, and that brings us back to the heart of Dhrupad, the poetry.
The lyrics.
Yes, the Dhrupad Annual talks about the 4 lines of a typical song text: sthayi, antara, sanchari, and aphoga. And they're usually in Braj-bhasa, a dialect known for its poetry and devotional feeling.
It creates that atmosphere.
And those lines often don't have a strict rhythm, which gives them a feeling of freedom and flow.
It's almost like the poetry mirrors the improvisation in the music.
It's a perfect blend. And don't forget those chaps, the signatures hidden in the words.
They're like secret messages.
Exactly, a way to connect with the composer. But as we learn all this, it's worth asking ourselves why it matters today.
Right. Why should someone listening in 2024 care about Dhrupad?
It's a great question. We've uncovered so much about it, but what's the takeaway?
What's the point of all this knowledge?
I think it comes down to this. Dhrupad, like all great art, goes beyond time and culture. It speaks to something universal in us.
A need for beauty, for meaning?
Exactly. When we engage with Dhrupad and its history, it opens us up to a new way of experiencing the world.
We connect with a rich tradition, and we're reminded of how powerful human creativity can be.
Yes, we're joining a centuries-old conversation about art, about spirituality, about the search for meaning.
And in that conversation, we find the beauty of Dhrupad, but also the beauty of being human.
Precisely. And as we go deeper into Dhrupad, let's keep that in mind. This ancient art form still has something to say to us today. It's amazing how much Dhrupad reveals about a whole civilization through its music and poetry.
Yeah, it's like we're hearing the echoes of their thoughts and feelings.
And we've seen how royal patronage played a key role, especially under Akbar and Shah Jahan. They didn't just fund it, they elevated its status.
Imagine performing for Akbar himself. What an incredible opportunity.
The pressure must have been intense, but also inspiring. And those courts were hubs of scholarship, too, preserving musical knowledge.
The Benaras and the Sahasras are perfect examples of that dedication.
They show a real commitment to Dhrupad's legacy from both rulers and musicians.
It's like they knew they were part of something much bigger.
And because of them, we have these resources to understand Dhrupad today, but we also have this puzzle of how it's represented in Persian and Sanskrit sources.
It is a bit strange that Persian texts were among the first to describe Dhrupad. You'd think Sanskrit text would be the primary source.
It might indicate that Dhrupad's popularity began with the elite, those more connected to the Persian-influenced court culture.
So it needed to be accepted there before entering the more traditional Sanskrit world.
Exactly. And Abul Fazl's description in the Ayyak-Bari supports that idea. He praises its refined taste, suggesting its appeal to the elite.
But it took centuries for Dhrupad to appear in a major Sanskrit text, like Bhavabhatta's Anupasangita Ratnakara.
It seems Dhrupad had to go through this transition, moving from a vernacular art form to a more formalized tradition.
It had to earn its place.
It did. And that brings us back to Dhrupad's heart and soul, the poetry.
The lyrics that give it life.
Yes, we've talked about those 4 lines. Sthayi, Antara, Sanchari, and Abhoga. Mostly written in Braj-bhasa, known for its poetic and devotional quality, and often without a strict rhythm.
Giving it that free-flowing feeling.
Exactly. It reflects the improvisation in the music, a perfect blend of words and sound. And of course, we can't forget those chaps, the composer's signatures woven into the lyrics.
Those hidden messages are so intriguing. But with all this knowledge about Dhrupad's history, style, and connection to dance, it's worth asking, why should this matter to someone listening today?
That's the key question. Why should we care about an ancient art form from another culture?
What's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think it comes down to the fact that Dhrupad, like all great art, goes beyond time and cultural boundaries. It speaks to something universal in us.
That need for beauty, connection, and meaning.
Exactly. Engaging with Dhrupad opens us up to a new way of seeing the world.
It connects us to a rich tradition and showcases the power of human creativity.
Yes. We're joining a conversation that has spanned centuries, a conversation about art, spirituality, and the search for meaning.
And in that conversation, we discover not only the beauty of Dhrupad, but also the beauty of our shared humanity.
Beautifully put. So as we conclude our deep dive into Dhrupad, we encourage you to explore it further. Listen to the music, learn its history, and discover its timeless beauty. And join us again on the Samvaad Podcast Series, decoding the scriptures as we continue to unearth these hidden gems of ancient Indian wisdom. Happy listening.